right?
Mhm.
Because I have to be able to communicate to my kids about AI.
Mhm.
If I can communicate to my kids about AI, one of the things that I can do is create an impression in them over and over about AI. Because if I let a video from YouTube that they watched one time create an impression about AI, that's going to be impactful. But it's far more impactful if I'm, as a dad, am able to communicate ideas and communicate those ideas in multiple perspectives. So they were there with an impression that is being created in them happens over time, and it happens over time in a way that I can control those information, right? So say, for example, they go to school and they're going to hear from 30 different kids about 30 different things about AI.
Mhm.
You cannot fight that. But one thing you can do is contribute into that conversation to kind of have them stand like, no, that thing about AI is not safe. Let's not do that.
Yeah.
That thing that, people are so, there's a lot of lawsuits out there about somebody in school creating an image of another person of the school.
Mhm.
Guess what that is? You're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
That would get you in legal trouble.
Yeah.
You got busted. Now you are not going to the college that you want to go to because you thought it was funny. So somebody should have raised their hand and be like, hey, that picture, delete that right now, right?
Yeah.
We can go down that rabbit hole, but I just want to use that as a point of communication, right?
Yes.
Communicate with your kid, because it's not your kid that did the deepfake, but he was part of that 4-man team.
Yeah.
One of them did it, but now they're all associated. So these are the kind of conversations that communication creates, that impression that you have to create over and over. So work in tech space, good for you. And I think you should talk to me a little bit more often so I can tell you a little bit more about the tech. But really, even the doctors, doctors are using AI nonstop. They have good impression about AI, but the kids are not using AI all the time. But one time they do, and it's a bad one, things happens, right? So you really have to ask the right questions and ask it to the ChatGPT. Ask it to somebody who's working in the AI space, right? Because they should be able to tell you some of the tools and some of these nuances of things that ChatGPT is not going to bring up. So one of the things that I always like to bring up is that, if you ask ChatGPT, ChatGPT is going to give you what it's trained on, right? But can ChatGPT give you off of the experience of somebody else? So I think I did that early on in the conversation when we talked about high schools. They get hacked a lot.
Mhm.
ChatGPT is not going to tell you, go to your high school and make sure the network is secure.
Right.
But you can go to the school and say, like, what is it like to be in the school? How often do you guys get hacked? And do you ever get hacked? And do you not tell the public about it, right? This is the concerns that is really coming through the research, that a lot of the schools don't report it at all.
Yeah, I can see
That's
that.
problematic, right? That's problematic. They're trying to secure some privacy, but at the same time, a lot of this Pandora's worms are, the Pandora's box of worms are coming out, right? That's
Yeah.
not good. You need to know somebody got hacked, and if they got hacked, you kind of be like, oh wait, I got to do
Yeah.
something, right? And somebody
Yeah.
needs to communicate that they got hacked, so that way I can start communicating and start asking questions.
Mhm.
Boy, we've been in this conversation for a minute now, but
Yeah, it sounds to me like it's still the most important thing to have open communication
yeah.
with your children, to have open communication with your school, your ISD within the community that you live in.
Yeah.
Have a conversation with the principals, with the school board, with
Right.
regard to the things that's happening within the school system, within the technology department, and how the systems may be compromised. I would actually, I would cheerlead you,
Right.
you all, to speak to your independent school district about the technology, and if they have been hacked, and being put on a list if anything like that ever happens, that you want to be one of the first to know that this has happened. Oftentimes, this information is not shared with the parents because they think that you don't care, but the thing is you're just absolutely busy.
That's right. That's
And just open dialogue could change everything drastically.
I think there's a segment to move in to the next part of it, of the conversation, because if you've been in the conversation for the last 40 minutes, what we talked about is how, why, and what of AI. And that's the important part of the conversation, because that's what warms people up, right? Now we can get into some of these things called data literacy, right? And then how that data literacy translates into jobs for some of the adults. And that data literacy brings about AI literacy for both the adults and the kids, right? And of course, we want to talk about Masako's mission to, help out the single parents. And what does the single parents need? A job in the data field. And having a job in the data field means they stay home, they can do remote work, and they don't have to travel hour and a half to go to the office and not be exhausted from the drive. They stay home and they take care of the kids, and they're able to do better jobs at parenting, which I would have loved to have when I was growing up. Thanks, mom and dad. No, I'm just kidding. My mom and dad is great. They're good people, but they worked really hard. Trust me, they worked really hard. That I'm trying to give my kids what my parents couldn't have done, right? Because the way that the workforce, was developed. Now the workforce that we're developing today is changing. It's shifting dramatically. It's going towards the way of data work, and there's lots of data work, and we kind of want to talk about these data work, the data literacy as a means to those data work, right? Now, I kind of want to say, like, we talked about why, how, and what of AI, which you can find on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Why, how, and what of kids and AI is not what's on YouTube widely available, right? So we want to kind of spread the word here. So if you're listening to this conversation and you think, like, you know what, that's important, because kids are not going to do why, how, and what of AI on YouTube. Mm-hmm. They're not going to look it up on Google. I should as a parent. And if I do as a parent, I should tell other parents too. So that way there's a conversation that needs to happen. And from that, we kind of get that awareness going, community development going. And of course, same with data literacy, right? Data literacy for the kids. That, I think, is happening slowly, right? Not as much as with the coding and programming. Coding and programming literacy is what's on top of everybody's mind. And every school district is pushing that out. But I think data literacy is what they need to do next, along with the coding and programming. Because I've spoken to a lot of the adults in the room, and I've spoken to the kids. I think they both have the same response. They didn't know how important data was. They knew how to code and program things, but they couldn't explain the data and the data's ability to create a picture of who we are as a person, the profile of us, right? So data literacy, I think, is the next part of the conversation. But as we're going into the world of data literacy, it needs to happen a lot more quicker. So
absolutely,
let's jump into the data literacy conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I first of all, STEAM has been big, right? Everyone talks about STEAM, science, engineer, mathematics, and all of that stuff. But here's the thing: without the data, you would not have any of those things. You know what I mean? With regard to mathematics is data.
Right.
Science is data. Like all of the things that they're doing, they're collecting data literacy, all of the things that they're doing within the STEAM program is collecting data. And so the data of these programs tells the picture. It's an analysis of what is happening in these different fields. So with regard to the space that we're in today with data literacy, you have to understand the data to be able to engineer what is happening. You have to be able to understand the data to tell the story, to paint the picture, to be a data scientist, if you will, a data analyst. And to understand data, to understand data, obtaining data literacy at this point right now for the parents, for the children they should be focusing on in school. Also, you can come to an understanding of data literacy within 6 months, and it would absolutely change the trajectory of your life and your lifestyle, because every field that you have today, insurance, pharmaceuticals, nutrition, every piece of information is data. So what do we understand about the data? That is what literacy is. So we have to be able to understand these points of information in order to tell a cohesive story about where it's been, where we are today. And if we do not change, this is where it's going to be. So it's the science of the literacy is the reason behind we need to understand data literacy.
Well, thanks for putting it that way. Because yeah, like you said, steam, and I'm like steam and data. Man, we got to make an equation somehow, like steam divided by D or something like that. I
Yeah,
don't know.
absolutely, because you cannot have any of those categories. So
Yeah.
I have, so my first degree is in mathematics. And I always say, if you know mathematics, if you know numbers, you can be on any planet and you will be able to have a conversation, because it's patterns, right? Numbers are patterns. Numbers are frequency. And so to be able to understand the data of the number, right? You have to be able to understand it in order to tell a story about it. So whether it's biology, engineering, science, technology, all of these things, each category, each field of category has data within it. And the literacy is the understanding. It's the English of the subject.
I'm,
And you
I'm
have
gonna,
to
I'm
understand
gonna, I'm gonna call you Neil deGrasse Tyson from now on, just the way you explained it. Wow, what
it.
a
Look, you got me
mind blowing way of
passionate.
explaining that. Oh my goodness,
That's my
mathematics.
jam.
Yeah, here comes Neil deGrasse Tyson. There you go. No, I'm literally am like, really am convinced that you don't even think, you cannot think unless you have mathematics in your head. So I think this is worth just mentioning that, because when we think of intelligence, which is artificial intelligence, but the intelligence is us actually, right?
Mhm.
Um, when we talked about earlier that spectrum of AI, the reason you don't have a good grasp of the spectrum is because we don't have a good grasp of our intelligence.
Yeah.
Our intelligence is so wide. It uses 86 billion neurons, and those 86 billion neurons, and here comes the mathematics of it, it doesn't care about a language. It just learns it based on mathematics. So
Mhm.
what you just said is so powerful, because like you said, you go to any planet, you want to communicate with them, figure out mathematics, and you be able to translate a language for them.
Yes.
So when AI learns its languages, so if you want to go back in history of AI, the reason AI is so powerful today is because around 2016, 2017, they did this thing called, we're going to learn languages, but we're going to just use a bunch of math to learn the language. All of a sudden, AI was coming up with its own language because it knew how to do this math under the language. So
Mhm.
if you think about your brain, the 86 billion neurons, it's not holding a bunch of ABCD letters in his head. It's literally holding how many times his neurons are firing, and using mathematics is trying to calculate, what did Asif just say? Was that English or Spanish? Because if it's Chinese Mandarin, I'm not going to do this thing anymore, right? I'm going to stop doing it because Mandarin is not catching on to my head. So the neuron that fires together wires together. So that's how you learn language, because those neurons that are firing based on numbers is how you learn a language. So that's how you get to understand data. Like that's the impossibility of data, right? I want to articulate something real quick. There's an art of possibility with AI, even though it's a spectrum.
Mhm.
There's no art of possibility with data. It's just impossible to know what data can do for you. There's no spectrum of data. Data is just everything in this whole universe, right?
Yeah. Every
So
point, every piece of information is a data
every
point.
single point, every single inches of this universe is data. But here's the fun part of being in this age and in 2025 is that you have this thing called data processing, which our ancestors would have said, what?
Mhm.
But if you asked that somebody 30 years ago, back in 2000, and when Y2K was happening, when the websites were being built, when Amazon was sharing stocks for like $30 a piece, they didn't have this thing called data processing as powerful as it is today.
Mhm.
So when you're talking about data literacy, the reason you have to be involved, or anybody who's listening has to be involved with data literacy, is because we're processing way too much data that 25 years ago, 100 years ago, we couldn't even imagine.
Mhm.
And it's only getting more speedier and speedier. And just to throw out an example, Microsoft Quantum chips that was released 2 weeks ago, that thing, I'm not even going to put a number on it. That's just impossible to put a number around that thing. That thing is insane amount of data processing. But data processing is what's happening. And where your data literacy come in is your ability to understand, take this infinite amount of data and process them correctly, right? Um, Yeah, data literacy is a huge topic.
Absolutely, and it has subsections of the literacy, and so it's important for everyone, if you will, to understand data literacy, because to understand data, you give whatever idea you're working on, you get all of this data, right, from these large language models. You get all of this data, and the question is now I have all of this data. What am I going to do with it? How do I clean the data? How do I paint the picture and tell the story with the data? And so just having an understanding of what that looks like and what steps to take, that's why it's important, because there's so many moving parts. But if you don't understand, 1 through 7, then what do you do? And I think it's important to start at 1, because data is something that's been around throughout, if we have breath in our lungs, we've had data. But the idea of having the literacy of data is what is taking us to the next stage, especially when it comes to, having a successful career, thinking about how you're going to, not be passed up for the next job promotion. What the question to ask is like, what can I do for myself today to understand the next big thing? How can I understand data? If you understand data, you'll understand the next big thing, because we're constantly progressing in life. And so there's one piece of information that's being evolved into the next piece, into the next piece. So it's important to just be curious about understanding what the next step is and how can I understand how to understand data. That's simply the question. That's the question we ask, is like, okay, what can I do to help myself understand data more? And what position can I be hired on, or can I get a promotion for through this course of understanding data literacy?
Yeah, and the shift is dramatic. The enablement of data processing, how quick we can process data, how much data we can process, where these data are coming from. So this has been a long journey, and a lot of people don't think about it that way, but it has been a long journey to develop this pipeline of data and establishing this pipeline of data, so that way it is kind of coming together in a central point. And once they do, they're able to process this data and push them back out again for a zero latency kind of experience, right? So the engineering behind it is massive. So when you hear like, oh, AI is taking over everything and is doing it so fast, well, it's taking it so fast and rapidly because we've realized AI about back in World War II era, right? We've actually had AI since 1900s, but when World War II happened and Alan Turing came in, he literally took everything and said like, yeah, if you can process data, you can process any data, no matter what the size and shape of that data is, right? But how do you process massive amount of data is a whole other question that Alan Turing couldn't get his hands on, or that generation couldn't get their hands on. But we literally have things that processes data for us. Let me just put like one number in there: 70 trillion bits per second.
That's a lot.
Let's just leave it at that. 70 trillion. There's a B and there's a T, so this is a trillion. And that system costs $250. I'm just throwing it out there, right? The most powerful tool that you can get your hands on costs $250. Like, who is not doing AI these days? I don't get it.
Yeah. So what do you say to the person that is, they're watching right now and they're like, data? What are they talking about? I work at the insurance agency.
Right. That's right. And so anytime you're touching your keyboard, you're creating a data. So if you've hit that space bar one time, or you made that space in your writing or email or text, you are creating a data. If you're using data that is coming through your phone and you're processing that data, it's because there's a machine learning in it that's allowing you to process that data. And the machine learning is AI. They don't call it AI up until a certain point, but it all starts with machine learning. Give or take, it all starts with machine learning. So when we have immense amount of data and you have to process it, and you want to process it to behave like an AI, you have to kind of run it through this thing called machine learning, right? And if you're ever interested, I can give you a rundown of machine learning from zero to hero, right? But if you want to understand data from just not laptop perspective, anything that you can look around left and right and say, where's the data? Let me give you a human intelligence and the data behind it. So this is something me and Masako probably talked about 4 years ago, I think. So I have a good slide presentations for those things. But the thing is, like, your brain, about 86 billion neurons that you have as an adult started with 2 billion neurons. So you can imagine 2 billion neurons growing into 86 billion neurons. Each of these means a data. Okay. So keyboard data, but you being in a single room for a few seconds is also data, because that's what your brain just did. That you walked into the room for the very first time, it collected about 10 million bits of data per second. Okay, so you walked into a room that you've never been in, and it collects 10 million bits of data per second. It processed it. By processing it, made a label and made a decision to tell you, you are in a new room now. You have never been in this room before. And the reason it can do that is because it has collected 10 million bits of data per second since the day you were born. It has been collecting that much data, and it has been processing it over, over, over. I'm talking about relentlessly. Like, it's collecting those data and processing it. So you're probably asking yourself, like, why would you just do that over and over? Why don't you just collect it one time and process it? Well, that's the difficulty of AI. AI cannot do that, but human bodies can. Human bodies have 5 sensors, and it collects all this data and it processes it. But the beauty of it is, every data that it has ever collected, supposedly, it is all stored in your subconscious mind.
Yeah.
So that temperature of the room when you're in the 6th grade and you walked in for the first time and you didn't have that good feeling about that room because the temperature was bad and you're feeling lonely because you just went to a new school, that memory is suppressed in your subconscious mind somewhere.
Yeah.
But if you don't pull that out every day, every hour to say, I just want to remember that over and over, you forget it.
Yeah.
Right? So if you think about the immensity of data that I mentioned earlier about the universe, forget universe. Your brain has way too much data that you cannot even tap into, because the universe is a far deal. I'm just talking about from here to here, you cannot access that much data.
Right. So it sounds to me like you're saying, you know what, you shouldn't be afraid. If you're someone, data, you should not be afraid. It is
Bam.
not something for you to fear. It is something that you already know. You have already been engulfed with it your entire life. It's something to understand at this point, and be able to understand it, to use it to your advantage. You're already a subject matter expert in data.
Yes, that's it. That's data literacy 101 right there, right? Because
Yes.
we really should not be scared of something that we're so familiar with. What we
Mhm.
have to do is familiarize ourselves and to not think this is an alien concept.
Yes.
Alien concept is artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Us, we're not alien. We know data. We know our data. One problems that we have with artificial intelligence is that we don't know how it works majority of the time. And because it doesn't know, it is an alien concept, because the brain doesn't need the information that AI feeds to
Yeah.
us, right? But let me not get into that yet. We can talk about it on the AI section. But for data literacy purposes, we are so familiar with all the things that happens in machine learning steps, with the AI steps, whatever the LLM steps you can talk about, ChatGPT. It happens within us, within these 2 parts of our brain, part 1 and part 2. How do I say this again?
Prefrontal cortex?
Yeah,
Brain?
like the one that is 1 and 2, the brain 1 and 2, you know?
Oh, brain one. Okay.
Yeah, there's a term for it. I forgot it right off my head.
Yeah.
But that's how familiar we are with data, right? So
Mhm.
if we can tap into our curiosity a little bit and talk about data from our perspective, all of a sudden you have to think about, like, how would an AI use it? And that's the whole race for AI right now, is to let the AI process that much data that often, that frequently, and come to an output as accurate as our output.
Yeah, it sounds to me like there should be a certain energy level for people when it comes to data literacy and AI. An excitement, right? Because when we're excited and we're thrilled about something, we run like, oh, okay, how can we get involved? Versus when we fear, we cower. I always say fear is it cripples. Fear is crippling. It takes the life out
Fear
of you.
fear creates that distance. Curiosity brings you more intimate.
Yeah, and so just to have an open mind and excitement about what your best next steps are to be your next best self when it comes to understanding what you already know, what you've already been walking in. It's being able to, see with a clear thought process that this is for you. It's not for you. It's something that's already available to you because you've already been moving in it. Now, how can you progress?
And this is the part of the conversation where data literacy has to be open to everybody. I'm talking about everybody in the society. So let's just put some numbers behind it. Like, the McKinsey report came out back in 2020s that said like everybody needs to be upskilled in AI. And the next year they came back and said, well, everybody should upskill by next year for AI. So that's 2021. By 2022, they said 25 million people at minimum needs to be upskilled for AI. Hello there, future AI developer. So that number is 25 million back in 2022. Now imagine 2023, 2024, and 2025. This number is going to stack higher and higher. And it's going to get to a point where every single person needs to have some data literacy. But the problem with data, it is so vast and it takes time to be data literate, right? It took me 10 years. The reason I can talk comfortably about data and participate in a data conversation, write certification about data, contribute in conversations about data is because it took me that long to get comfortable with data. And I'll tell you, it wasn't the most comfortable way of learning about data because, I guess that's a personal story. Don't need to say much about it, but it does take a lot of time, right? For even data experts, right? But for a person that doesn't do data all day long, they really have to start thinking about their domain expertise and say, everything I've learned for the last 10 years, if I'm a domain expert of it, I really need to add a data somewhere in that domain expertise. I need to put AI somewhere in that domain expertise. How does AI fit into these pieces? How does my domain expertise do better and I can do more work because I'm data literate and I have AI to help me with that, right? It literally just comes down to data, actually. That's the communications that you have to have is with data, right? So data-driven decision makings and so on and so forth really relies a lot on your domain expertise and your ability to translate your domain expertise through data.